There's a moment in March 2018 that has been almost entirely removed from the official history of a billion-dollar construction project in Houston, Texas. On March 15th of that year, a pedestrian bridge near the campus of Florida International University collapsed onto a highway below it, crushing several vehicles and killing 6 people. The bridge had been installed just 5 days earlier. It was designed by a firm called Fig Bridge Engineers. 4 days after that collapse, 4 days, the Harris County Toll Road Authority approved the construction contract for the replacement of the Sam Houston Tollway Ship Channel Bridge. The engineer of record on that project was FIGG Bridge Engineers. Nobody said anything publicly. The authority issued no statement connecting the two events. There was no pause. There was no announcement to the drivers who would eventually use the bridge, or to the county residents whose toll payments were funding it, that the firm newly associated with a fatal collapse was simultaneously the designer of record on the most expensive infrastructure project in Harris County history. Construction proceeded. Equipment moved onto the site. Pylons began to rise above the ship channel. The question of what was known and when and by whom and why nobody stopped the work is the center of this story. The bridge itself, the engineering failure, the cost overruns, the years of delay, is almost secondary to the institutional behavior that allowed it to unfold. If this is your first time here, you're watching a channel that covers what happens when public money, private contractors, and the absence of accountability occupy the same construction site. Subscribe. The story of the Houston Ship Channel Bridge is one of the clearest examples of what that absence looks like in practice. The ship channel itself is one of the most consequential industrial corridors in North America. It runs 52 miles from the Gulf of Mexico into the heart of Houston, connecting the Port of Houston, the nation's largest port by foreign tonnage, to refineries, petrochemical plants, and storage terminals that line both banks for most of that distance. The industries along the channel produce plastics, fuels, and chemicals that supply global supply chains. They also produce something else, one of the most sustained and documented records of toxic air emissions and contaminated sediment anywhere in the United States. Communities along the ship channel, predominantly low-income, predominantly Black and Latino, live within a corridor where cancer risk from air pollution ranks among the highest in the country. Children who live within 2 miles of the ship channel have been found to have a 56% higher incidence of leukemia than those who live 10 miles away. The burden of particulate matter pollution in these communities runs roughly twice as high as it does for white residents in wealthier parts of Houston. In parts of neighborhoods like Manchester and Galena Park, cancer risk from air toxics is more than triple the national average. Amnesty International has described the corridor as a sacrifice zone. The NRDC has published analyses documenting 50 to 60 times the particulate matter burden in certain neighborhoods compared to the broader Houston region. These are not contested findings. They are documented by federal agencies. What is contested is whether they matter in decisions about what gets built and how. The bridge that Harris County decided to replace in the mid-2010s was the original Sam Houston Tollway Ship Channel Bridge, a 4-lane structure that opened in May 1982. At the time of its completion, it was the longest box girder span in the Western Hemisphere, a genuine engineering achievement, but it was built for a different era of traffic and a different scale of ship channel commerce. By the time planning for a replacement began, the bridge was carrying roughly 55,000 vehicles per day, a number projected to grow to 160,000 by 2035. The channel itself was in the middle of an expansion project, Project 11, a multi-billion-dollar Army Corps of Engineers initiative to widen and deepen the waterway to accommodate larger cargo vessels, and a new bridge would need to provide greater vertical clearance to accommodate that future traffic. Harris County Toll Road Authority began the design process in 2015. They hired Fig Bridge Engineers, a Florida-based firm, in 2013 for an initial contract of $4.25 million. In 2015, FIG received a further $20.4 million for final design services. The finished design was submitted to the county in June 2017. The design called for a cable-stayed bridge, 2 spans, each carrying 4 lanes of one-way traffic, with dramatic concrete pylons of the kind that give major bridges their visual identity. The county approved the construction contract in January 2018. The contractor was a joint venture called Ship Channel Constructors, made up of Trailer Brothers Incorporated and Zachary Construction Corporation. The total estimated project cost was $962 million. The project was the largest in the authority's history. On March 15, 2018, the Florida International University pedestrian bridge collapsed. On March 19, 2018, Harris County approved the construction contract and work began. The authority's own timeline of events, published later, records these 2 dates without comment. The 4-day gap between a fatal collapse caused by the project's engineer of record and the formal commencement of that same engineer's largest active project is recorded as if it were coincidental rather than institutional. In subsequent investigations and hearings, county officials would describe the FIU collapse as a triggering event that eventually led to the independent review. What the timeline also shows is that in the immediate aftermath of that collapse, the authority allowed work to proceed without any public disclosure of the connection. FIGG, for its part, disputed that its design caused the FIU collapse. The National Transportation Safety Board eventually concluded otherwise. The probable cause of the collapse, the NTSB found, was load and capacity calculation errors made by FIGG in the design of the structure. OSHA concluded separately that the bridge had structural design deficiencies that FIGG should have known about. The Federal Highway Administration, citing FIGG's conduct related to the FIU collapse, suspended the firm in July 2020 and proposed a 10-year debarment from participating in federally funded projects. By that point, Harris County had already spent $417 million on a bridge that had been partially built using a design the county's own independent consultant had found to contain 21 significant flaws. The sequence matters. FIGG was hired in 2013. The design was completed in 2017. Construction started in 2018. The Florida collapse happened in March 2018. The county did not hire an independent firm to review FIGG's Houston design until March 2019, a full year after the Florida collapse. That independent firm, COWI North America, submitted its findings in March 2020. The findings cited 21 significant design concerns. Construction was paused in January 2020 when COWI first informed the county that it had identified the problems. The pause, initially described as temporary, became indefinite. Then the county fired FIGG. The formal vote was unanimous. The language from county officials was unambiguous. The previous design was flawed, they said. It would have led to failure of the bridge. In the words of the Toll Road Authority's own executive director, it could have collapsed. There is no comfortable way to hold those words alongside the construction timeline. The firm whose design the county's own executive director said could have caused a collapse was allowed to remain as engineer of record for more than 2 years after a fatal collapse attributed to that firm's errors in Florida. During those 2 years, $400 million in construction work proceeded. Pylons were built. Foundations were poured. Work that would subsequently need to be partially demolished using high-pressure water jets, a demolition process described as requiring extreme care to preserve the usable foundations while removing the flawed superstructure, was completed under a design that the county now acknowledges would have failed. The question of accountability, in the months and years that followed, moved through legal channels the public has never been given a clear view of. The county attorney's office was reported to be exploring what legal avenues might be available to recoup costs from FIGG. No resolution of those proceedings has been made public in any detail that would allow a citizen to understand what, if anything, was recovered from the firm whose design required hundreds of millions of dollars in additional spending to correct. The correction was not inexpensive. After firing FIGG, the county hired COWI. the same firm that had identified the flaws, as the new design engineer. The construction contract was amended from $567.9 million to $859.4 million, an increase of approximately $291 million. That increase included $50 million specifically for the demolition of bridge structure that had already been built under the flawed design. The total cost of the project, once estimated at $962 million and publicly described as a billion-dollar project, was acknowledged to be well beyond that figure, though the authority declined for an extended period to provide a definitive updated total, saying only that negotiations with the new engineering team were ongoing and that final costs had not been determined. The original completion date was 2021. After the halts, the redesign, the demolition of faulty components, and the renegotiated contract, completion of the first span was pushed to 2025. The second span is not expected until 2027. A project that was supposed to take roughly 6.5 years has stretched to nearly a decade, carrying with it cost increases that the toll-paying public has absorbed without any public accounting of responsibility. Those toll payers are worth pausing on. The Ship Channel Bridge is funded entirely by the Harris County Toll Road Authority, meaning entirely by the people who pay to drive on Harris County's toll roads. There is no federal money in this project, a fact that is relevant for two reasons. First, the absence of federal funding was noted at the time as the reason the county did not initially require an independent design review. Such reviews are common, but not mandatory on major projects that involve no federal financing. The county essentially bought a nearly billion-dollar design from a single engineering firm without the standard layer of oversight that federal projects typically require. Second, the absence of federal money means that when costs escalated by nearly $300 million, those costs were absorbed not by any state or federal reallocation, but by the driving public of Harris County. The communities adjacent to the bridge and the channel have their own version of this story, which runs alongside the engineering failure without quite intersecting it. The dredging that has accompanied the channel's expansion, Project 11, deepening and widening the waterway to accommodate larger ships, has produced massive quantities of contaminated sediment. That sediment, laced with arsenic, dioxins, benzidine, PCBs, heavy metals including lead and mercury, and dozens of other compounds at levels that exceed federal safety benchmarks, has been deposited in containment hills located in communities like Galena Park and Pleasantville. These are the same communities that already carry some of the highest cancer risks from air pollution in the United States. In 2024, a coalition of environmental organizations found 11 chemicals in ship channel sediment that exceeded EPA screening levels. Among them was arsenic at 45 times the concentration considered safe. Residents asked the Army Corps and the Port of Houston to conduct comprehensive testing of the dump sites before adding more material. They were told it was not in the Corps' protocols to do so. The environmental impact statement for the Project 11 expansion, published in December 2019, acknowledged that the neighborhoods near the sediment dump sites have minority-dominated populations. It concluded that the depositing of dredged material would not have environmental justice implications, in part, the document explained, because some of the sites were already in use. The fact that a community has been used as an industrial waste site in the past was offered as a reason why continuing to use it as an industrial waste site does not constitute an injustice. The bridge that is being built over this channel is not being built for those communities. It is being built for the cargo and commuter traffic that the Port of Houston's expansion is expected to generate. The tankers and container ships and chemical barge transits that in 2024 numbered more than 21,000 annually. The bridge provides the vertical clearance those ships require. The communities beneath the flight path of its construction cranes and adjacent to the containment hills where its dredge spoil accumulates are receiving something else: the environmental cost of an infrastructure decision made for the benefit of an industrial corridor that has spent decades treating their neighborhoods as the acceptable edge of someone else's commerce. The Harris County Toll Road Authority, for its part, has defended the project throughout its delays and cost escalations with language centered on safety. Whatever the cost, county officials have said at multiple points, safety cannot be compromised. This framing is not false. After identifying the design flaws, the county made the decision to halt construction, fire the engineer of record, redesign the compromised elements, and demolish the portions that could not be salvaged. Those are the correct decisions. They were made, however, years after a fatal collapse should have triggered them, after $400 million in public money had been spent on a potentially catastrophic design, and without any public accounting of why the connection between FIG and the FIU collapse did not prompt an independent review until a full year after the Florida bridge fell. The bridge is still under construction. The first span, if current projections hold, will open by the end of 2025. The second will follow in 2027. The old bridge will be demolished once traffic can be redirected across the new one. The project will eventually be complete, and the Sam Houston Tollway will carry far more traffic across the ship channel than the 1982 structure ever could. The Port of Houston will accommodate larger ships. The industries along the channel will expand their output. What no one in authority has yet explained is how an engineering firm with a documented connection to a fatal collapse was allowed to continue as engineer of record on a nearly billion-dollar bridge for more than 2 years at a cost of $400 million in construction activity before being removed. What documents exist regarding the county's internal discussions in the spring of 2018, in the 4 days between the Florida collapse and the Houston construction start, and in the months that followed, have not been made available in any comprehensive form. The legal proceedings related to cost recovery from FIG have not been publicly resolved in any way that tells the paying public whether anyone has been held financially accountable. The bridge will open. The pylons will be visible from miles away. The cable stays will catch the light over the ship channel the way they do on the Fred Hartman Bridge, a few miles to the east, which is what the county originally wanted this one to look like. The communities in Galena Park and Pleasantville and Channel View will continue to live under the containment hills and the refinery stacks, and the cancer risk numbers will continue to be documented by federal agencies and published in academic papers and cited in reports that recommend further testing and further study and further engagement with officials who say it is not in their protocols. The tolls will keep coming. Nobody has said what they paid for.